In this video, I'm going to give you information on how to fill out the client interview form to provide information to your attorney for estate planning. You're watching this video because your estate planning attorney has emailed you a link to the online form to provide information necessary to prepare your estate plan. In this video, I'm going to explain the 4 steps you need to take to complete the form. The 4 steps are: 1. Accessing the client interview form from your email. 2. How to exit the form and then how to go back to the form. 3. How to enter information. And 4. Creating the client interview document and saving it to your computer for your review later. Watching this video before you start the form will enable you to complete the form more quickly and efficiently. This video explains how you can access the client interview form. The hypothetical clients are named Let's take a look at an email like the one you may have received. The hypothetical clients are named John and Jane Jones. John has an email account in Gmail. His attorney, John Olson, has sent an email to John with a link to the online client interview form.
Here's the link in the email.
This is the email in John's Gmail account.
Once you click the link, you will see this
Let's double
screen.
click on the email
The
to
email
open
is
it.
already in the form.
Once the email is
so
open,
is John's name.
you can
At this
see
point,
the
get a
link
password and confirm a password.
to access the online form.
Then he click on
If he double clicks
register
on the
and
link, his
confirm.
internet browser will open and
could
this form will
Save the
appear.
password at this point.
Note
Now
John's
he, has
email
to
is
accept
already in the
or
form,
reject the terms of service.
and
So go
also
ahead
his
and
name's
click
already in the form.
Accept.
Now John is asked to create a
Taken
password
to the
and to
client
confirm the
interview
password.
form.
Once he's entered the password, then he would click the register and confirm button. Now at this point, he could save the password to his internet browser if he so chooses. Then he is asked to read the terms of service and to accept or reject the terms of service. So he would go ahead and accept the terms of service by clicking the accept button. Then he would be taken to the client interview form and he could start filling out the form. This video shows you how you can exit the client interview form and then return to the form to continue working. In a previous video, we showed you how the hypothetical client, John Jones, was able to access the client interview form by clicking on a link in an email he received from his attorney, John Olson. This is what he saw once he accessed the form. He really doesn't have time to work on the form right now, but he's going to take a minute to review the information about his name that his attorney has already entered. So he clicks on the arrow to the left of John's information, and it opens up, and he scrolls down to review the information, and he notices that his birth date's wrong. It's January 2, 1980, but in fact his birthday is January 1, 1981. So he goes in here and he just makes a change. Now he says okay, and now at this point he really doesn't want to spend any more time working on the form. He wants to save his work and then to return later in the day to continue working on the form. So he looks down at the bottom of the screen and he sees a button named Finish Later. When he clicks that button, his work is saved. Now, the first time he does this, after he's accessed the interview for the first time, he's going to see this note telling him that his work has been saved and that he can return by clicking this hyperlink here. Now, he can certainly save that. He could copy that and save it somewhere. But there's an alternate way. It's probably better because he might have trouble finding this link again. If he goes back to the email that he got from his attorney, and he goes to the email and opens it up again, if he clicks back on the link, then by clicking on the link, This would take him back to the interview, and he could then continue working. Let me take just a minute to scroll through the form to give you an overview. Notice the slider on the right-hand side. If I click on it with my mouse, I can drag it up and down. Also notice that there are little triangles at the bottom and at the top. And each time I click, if I click once, it goes down one line. Or if I click the top triangle, it goes up one line. Now let's just kind of review the form for a minute, an overview, just to see the types of questions that are being asked. There's personal information, information about children, other important people, disinherited persons, financial advisors, additional information, beneficiary information, questions about the personal representative, guardians, power of attorney, advance directive, asset information, who referred you, and some notes you could make for the attorney. Now, some of these, there's some information here already that's been filled in. This would have been probably by your attorney after he talked to you on the telephone and before he sent you the link. If you click the down triangle, you can see it says, are you, and in this case, the clients are a married couple creating documents for both spouses. I mean, it could be a single person, or a married individual creating documents just for one spouse, or an unmarried couple. So you pick the one that's appropriate. If it's wrong, you can go ahead and change it. We're just going to leave it the same. Then, and personal information, you'll see how these categories are kind of grouped. For John's information, there is a arrow. You see there are arrows and pluses. So if you click the arrow, it expands. And you can see that the attorney has already typed in John's name. But there are some other things to check. If John wanted to use his first initial, he could check this. If he wants to use his full middle name, he could click here. And then you see the name would change. So in the documents, it would be John Andrew Jones. Now, it's very important that you make sure that the name is spelled correctly. And then with respect to John, there's more questions. The attorney may have typed in some of this information or maybe not, but you would just answer the question. And the way the form works is that you have options. So if you click the little triangle, you'll see there's options. Dates, enter your social security number, enter the address where you live. If you're not a citizen of the United States, be sure and check this box because there are certain tax implications of not being a citizen of the United States that the attorney has to know. Up to this point in the video, we've been looking at the form as it was when you opened the link. Some questions were already answered, but most of the questions were unanswered. Now I want to show you how the form might look if you had gone through the form and answered the questions. I have gone through the form as if I were the client and answered the questions to show you how you would fill out the form. Let's go over the form now. Let's return to personal information for just a second. We've already talked about how to fill out John's information. Remember, to fill out Jane's, you would click the arrow and then go ahead and fill it out. And just again, a reminder, it's going to default to Jane A. Jones. If you want to use the middle name, you have to check this box right here to make it Jane Alice Jones. You'd want to enter her birth date, social security number. Usually when people are married, they have the same address, so you can click yes, her address is the same as John's. Remember again to check if she is not a citizen of the United States, check. It's going to default to she is a citizen of the United States. Put in her phone number and her email address. When you're done, you click OK. Now let's move on to children. This couple has children. So the answer would be yes. If they don't, you would click no. So yes. And let's take a look at how you'd fill out the form for a child. So to fill out a form, you would click the arrow. If you've already got one in there and you want to add another one, you click add another. And it would be in blank then. If you've done that, and now you have 1, 2, 3, and you want to get rid of the third one, if you go over here and check the X, it will go away. It's the same for all of the assets and everything. That's how you would eliminate one if you've made a mistake. Let's take a look at William A. Jones. So his name is William Andrew Jones. Same idea. Check if you want to use full middle name. Personal information, male, birth date. This is important. Whose child is it? So if you click in the box, you can see you have 3 options. It could be John's child, Jane's child, or a child from the marriage. If you click outside the box, it goes away. It's not really too important that you have the Social Security number. And in this case, this child doesn't have a Social Security number because this child is young. If the child were deceased, you would check this. And to exit this, you just click OK. And you do the same thing for Phoebe. Now, let's talk about other important people and how this works. You see, the form says here, name any other important people or entities. Entities are things like businesses or banks or insurance companies. Please include anyone other than children who will inherit or receive anything. Well, if you're anything to do with the children is going to already be here because you put their information in about the children. But this would be other than children. Like, for instance, who will inherit or receive anything, any lenders, like on mortgages, or any homeowners insurance companies for any real property, retirement companies, banks you have accounts with, or charities you want to leave gifts to. You will need this information later in the interview. Well, you'll see when we get down to talking about assets, or when we get down to talking about who's going to inherit, that you'll have a drop-down list, for example, for the assets. And if you don't include, it's going to ask you who is the institution, like on the lender or the bank. And if you don't have that bank listed here and other important people, and it's not going to be available to you when you click the drop-down. Just for instance, Robert Jones here, this couple have young children, so the children aren't going to be representative to them. They're not going to be the personal representative or guardian or attorney in fact or a healthcare representative. So they're going to use the brother, Robert Samuel Jones is the brother of John and the brother-in-law of Jane. And again, it's not necessarily so important here to put in their birth date and social at this point. This may be added later by the attorney or he may need it, but you don't have to fill that out. You probably wouldn't know that. But what is important is you have to indicate what role they're going to play in this case. And in this case, Robert is going to be used as a personal representative. So, or that's what a fiduciary would be. That could be trustee, personal representative, or attorney in fact. So if you don't click this, then when you go down later in the form to say who you want to have to be the personal representative under the will, this name won't be available. So if you run into that situation, you go back and just add the name of the person who you want to be the personal representative and then put in their information. Now that being said, so what you should do is you should think about people who are going to serve for you and enter their information here at the outset in other important people. When you if you're going to do a trust and transfer your home into the ownership of the trust or any other property, we need to know who the homeowner's insurance company is. And so for here, this case, it's the Samuelson Insurance Company. And you notice that the role here is insurance company. And the name, your contact name, so just fill this form out. If you have to do that if you have real estate property. Who do you have your checking account with? Who do you have your savings account, checking savings? Maybe it's more than one bank. Here, this couple have accounts at Chase Bank. They also at Bank of America. They also have accounts at Vanguard. So you want to put in the information for these institutions. Marriott, this is a timeshare they own. So when they know that one of their assets is a timeshare, so you would enter this information first. So you can, when you discuss the timeshare later in the asset information, the name of the company will be available. Computershare, in this case, and you're not going to have all of these types of assets, but I'm just trying to illustrate all of them that would be possible for, this is a hypothetical type client. Nobody would have all of these assets, but I'm just trying to illustrate how you would fill out the form if you had an asset like this. CompuShare would be a company that holds stock certificates for people. So if you have any stock that is not at a broker, but held by, you have the shares, perhaps you had them with ComputerShare, or I think it's CompuShare. Now, Nike, why Nike? Well, John works for Nike, and John has stock options, and so you need that information. Who is the company that issues the stock options later on? Jane's Floral Design is an entity. She has a florist shop, so one of her assets is a business. So you would want to enter the information about her business here. MetLife, they have insurance through MetLife. So John has insurance through MetLife, so you'd want to have MetLife in here. And for short, you really want to try and get the addresses for each one of these entities. I mean, Vanguard or these Fidelity might be hard to find the address, but you should look on the internet until you find an address. Why are we doing the addresses? Well, we're going to be writing letters to these companies as part of what we do. So we need to know their address. So when we produce the letters have the correct addresses on them. Now, don't worry, this can all be edited. If you, for some reason, can't fill something out, don't worry about it, because when you talk with the attorney later, we can add more information. But try and do as much as possible at the outset. It's going to save a lot of time. Now, so that's other important people. Now, disinherited people, this would be obvious. If you're going to disinherit somebody, this would be somebody who would normally, you would be leaving something to, like a child, for instance. It's not just anybody, but people who normally, if you didn't have a will, would inherit under the laws of intestate succession. And you just want to make sure, sometimes families are, have problems. And if that's the case, you would want to say yes here. And then you'd want to add people. You click the plus to talk about who is going to be disinherited. Financial advisors. Well, if you click the arrow, you see right now they've answered no. John, they don't have an accountant. They don't have a financial advisor. But if you do, put the information in here, because the attorney will perhaps want to work with your financial advisor or with your accountant in connection with your estate plan. Now, additional information is there's a number of topics in here. The first is marriage information. And you'll see that the question is asked, have John and Jane ever lived together in the following states? And these are all states that have community property. Your attorney can explain that to you, why that would be important. But it is important if you've lived in a state like this prior to living in Oregon. Or if you haven't, you just click none of the above. How long have they been married? Answer, do they have a prenuptial agreement? Because that might affect their ability in their estate planning. And a prenuptial agreement, you can talk with if you're unsure what that is, you can talk with your attorney about that. Then there's information about John, and then there's information about Jane. Just general information, like how many years has John lived in Oregon? Does John want the firm to represent Jane and him jointly? And the same question is asked of Jane. The attorney can only represent two people if they do not have a conflict of interest. And so this is just signifying to the attorney that you and your spouse are in agreement on the estate planning and want the attorney to represent both of you. Then there's information about John's employment, disability. If he is receiving disability, it might affect the type of estate planning we can do. A gift tax return, most people have never done this, but some people have, and this again has an impact on the estate tax. And we want to know if John has an existing will or trust already, especially a trust, if we're going to just amend a trust, for instance, or restate the trust. Has John been previously married? Well, if so, we want to know so, just in case we can kind of rule out any problems with inheritance. Is he self-employed or owns his own business? We want to know the answer to that. And then, is he the beneficiary of an existing trust? And this could be a situation where maybe the first spouse has died and the survivor spouse is receiving benefits under a type of a trust like a credit shelter trust or a disclaimer trust. Usually the answer is no. If you have any questions, you can discuss this with your attorney. Then what follows is the same information for Jane that we asked for John. Now, the next area, and see, you can go back here. It's so broad. You can go back up to the top where you have the additional information. If you click the arrow again, it tightens it all up. So it's easier then to navigate through the form if you're trying to go. And if you just close up these little windows as you complete answering the questions. The next is beneficiary information. Now, this is sort of a wide open area. We're just trying to get your ideas. The attorney's just trying to understand what you want to do. Don't worry if you don't know the answers to these questions. Just try your best, and then you will have more discussions with the attorney about what you want to do, and the attorney can advise you. Sometimes people just aren't sure how they should do things, and that's, of course, why they have an attorney. And your attorney will help you to clarify what your will or trust should say about who is going to inherit your property. This last question, the second question here, is if all the people mentioned died before you. This is kind of a scenario that's very rare. It would be if you and say all your kids died, your wife died, all the kids have died, all the grandkids have died. Be like that accident over at Gerhardt where the airplane crashed into the house at Christmas and killed the whole family. Who's going to get the estate? And your attorney will discuss this with you. It could be, your heirs or under Oregon law, or it could be, say, for instance, a charity or a group of charities, something that is always going to be in existence. It's not going to die like the people could die who maybe you've left your estate to. So then now we're starting to talk about who is going to be representing you. And this is, for the will, for instance, on your will, who is going to be the personal representative? Now, the first issue is the couple going to use the same representatives? That's typically the case. So here, if you say yes, and then you talk about the personal representatives for John, it's going to be mirrored for Jane. So in John's, if he has died, he wants Jane to be the personal representative. And if Jane can't serve, he wants Robert to serve. And if on Jane's will, it would be Jane would want John. You don't have to say that. We know that's what you mean. Now, I've left this blank here just to illustrate how you add people, because this has already been filled in. But if you want to add a third personal representative, an alternate, you click the plus sign. And then you get to select who you want to do. Now, the people on this list, so he would like to select Sandra, his sister-in-law, to be the third. Why is Sandra on this list? Well, he's just selected. Why is Sandra on the list? Well, Sandra is on the list because in the other important people, when you look at Sandra, her role is a fiduciary. And if this weren't checked, Sandra wouldn't be on the drop-down list. That's the point I'm making, why it's important to have the other important people listed first. It just makes it go faster. I mean, you could, if you didn't see Sandra, you could come back here, add her as another important person, but that just kind of takes time, and you're scrolling up and down the form, and you'll see that's even more irritating when you're talking about the assets because it's the same concept. So that's basically how you would add people to be enough. If you pick no, you're going to see over here, then you could do it separately, and they could be different. But we're going to do yes here. The guardians, well, it would be yes here because this couple has minor children under 18. If they're over 18, the answer would be no. And if you would do the guardianship. So the guardian information, you would again click the arrow, and you see we've got Robert. So now this, if you're going to have a guardian, you're going to You're not going to add the spouse because you don't need a guardian unless both spouses have died. So in this case, it would be if both spouses have died, you would pick Robert and Sandra in that order to be the guardians. The power of attorney. So I'm going to go back and click this arrow back again to sort of tighten up the form. Now, power of attorney. Will you use the same power of attorney agent designations for both John and Jane? Well, in this case, the answer is yes. So again, you would click here to add. Now, this one doesn't have, this. I guess this is actually kind of filled out wrong here because the attorneys, in fact, should be, so this would be an example of what happens if you did it wrong. You really wanted to make Robert, you really wanted to make, on the attorneys, in fact, the spouse. So in John's case, he's going to want to have Jane. So now it reads, who's going to be for John? And it's the same, it's going to be Jane, would be the initial attorney, in fact, and then Robert, and then Sandra. Now, if you had different ones, you would then click no, and you could then do the same thing over here for Jane. If you say yes, for Jane's side, it's going to be John. Automatically, that will happen. Now, the advance directive is similar to the power of attorney. They're asking, who do you want to be your healthcare representative if you can't speak for yourself? Now, in this case, I'm just illustrating what would happen if they're different, and they could be different here. For instance, so for John is going to pick Jane if he can't talk for himself, then his brother, then his sister-in-law. Jane is going to pick John, but then she wants her sister, not her brother-in-law, to be the second, and then the brother-in-law. So that illustrates how you could have separate representation. Now we get to a big topic. This is asset information. We need to know for estate planning what you own, because the essence of estate planning is planning who is going to inherit your assets when you pass away. And to be able to be sure that we know where your assets are going to go, we need to know what assets you have. Now, you'll see there's a lot of assets here. We've gone through, there's 21 different assets. Most people don't have this type of a mix, but what I've tried to do is to show you how you would answer questions regarding the various types of assets. Let's take a look at how this works. So if you're going to do a new one, say another one down here, this is the typical thing. You see this, you have to say what type of asset is it. You click the triangle and a long list appears of different types of assets. So if it were real estate, you'd pick real estate. Then they want to know, how is it owned? Well, in this case, this is the list. You see there's John could own it individually, but sometimes clients already have a trust, and maybe their trust owns the asset. In this case, John and Jane don't have a trust. So for John and Jane, the answer to this question would either be John owns it individually, like say an IRA, for instance, or maybe he owns a bank account individually, or maybe Jane the same. Or maybe they own things jointly. Of course, when people are married, they own things, a lot of things jointly, like the house or the bank accounts. And if that's the case, for that particular asset, you would select that. So I'm going to say okay here. And you see, I've got this one here. It says number 22. See, it's empty. Well, I don't want that anymore. So I'm going to go over here and click the X and make it go away. Let's just kind of go through the list, because this will illustrate the various, how you would fill out the form for various types of assets. So here is the real estate. This is they own it jointly, and it's the type of real estate is their primary residence. It could be vacation home, investment, vacant land, retirement, community refund, or other. And the questions that you have for the different assets are different, depending on the type of asset that we're dealing with. These are the things we need to know in order to do the estate planning. Notice the address isn't correct. There's no address here for their primary residence. Well, you can go up here, you could close this, say okay, go back up to the top, look for John's information, scroll down to the address here. This is the address of their primary residence. You can highlight it, do Control C, or you could just do a right mouse click copy, say OK, go back down again to that asset we were just looking at, the real estate, go down to where the address is, click in, go Control V or paste, and it's Lake Oswego. I know that, so I'm just going to type it in. Lake Oswego. If you get the state, you can tab over with the tab key. And for Oregon, you take the O and you hit it 3 times. O, O, O gets to Oregon. And it's 97034 for Lake Oswego. So you just enter that. Now the form is complete. The insurance company information. Okay, that's not answered either. How do you fill that in? Well, you go here. Look, Samuelson Insurance Agency, State Farm, is one of the insurance companies that's available. Why is it available? Well, again, if you go back to the other important people, if you filled in up here, Samuelson Insurance Company, and you've added a role that it is an insurance company, that's what makes it show up on the list. So if you didn't do that, if you didn't enter Samuelson, now you'd have to go back and enter Samuelson Insurance Agency as another important person, which is kind of a pain. So it's easier if you just enter the information on other important people first, rather than waiting until you get down into the asset information. You just have to think about the different assets you own or the insurance company and enter the information first. So if I go back down here again to the real estate, scroll down to the real estate, click the arrow again, that opens it up, and go down here, and I'm asked for who's the home or real property insurer. I click the down arrow, there's Samuelson, answered. The number, well, you need the number. Let's just put in a fake number. You look at your your insurance information, and you've got that, and you say, okay. So that's how you do that. The next topic is personal. See, if I do the drop down, I'm just going down the list. Real estate, personal account, timeshare. I'm going to show you how you fill them out. So this is the personal property. You just estimate the property value inside your house. It's not the cars or other assets, just the stuff in your car. And you can put any number you want down here. It's just a placeholder. And who owns it? Well, right now they own it together. Okay. Now we have another piece of real estate, just to illustrate something different. Here, this is real estate. I guess I've got this in 2 times. That's kind of interesting. So what did I do here? Real estate, look, I did it twice. I made a mistake. Well, I guess I'll just go over here and click the X and get rid of this second real estate. I'll say, okay, now it's gone away. So we have the first real estate, which is the residence. Then we have personal. Now there's another real estate. This is a vacation home over at Seaside that John owns. Maybe he inherited this. It's just his. So it's John individually. What type of asset is it? It's a vacation home. Is there a mortgage? Yes. And you put the loan balance, the account number, the address of the property, and who's the lender? Well, Bank of America. Why does Bank of America show up? Well, because you put down it was a financial institution. That's why up here. So if you go back to Bank of America, up here at the other important people, and look at Bank of America, you see the role of Bank of America is a financial institution. That's why it's on the list. Now going back to the assets again, so now we've talked about real estate, personal property. Now let's look at these different accounts they have. So what is an account? Well, an account would be like in a bank account or a brokerage account. It's important to understand that it's not, you can have accounts that are retirement accounts. They're different. So if the account you're talking about is like an IRA or a 401k, maybe you have an account at Vanguard that is, a retirement account. Maybe you have an account at Vanguard that's a brokerage account. Well, you want to characterize them separately. In this case, this account here is a bank account and it's a checking account. It could be, you could have brokerage, CD, checking, money market, savings, 529 plan. Those are different types of accounts. The bank, Chase. Why does Chase show up? Again, it's a financial institution is the role that was checked in other important people. Okay, then we've got another account. Here's an account at Chase. So another account. This is a savings account. You have the number, the value, and what bank is it at? Okay, so you would just go through your accounts at Chase and just list them separately. The same would be true for like Bank of America. So here's Vanguard, And then Vanguard, what we've got here, this is a brokerage account at Vanguard. This is the account number. It's at Vanguard, and that's the value based off the statement. What you want to do is get your statements out for your checking account, savings account, the different banks you bank at, your online accounts, everything. Get the statements and have them available, because you're going to need to know the address for the institution, the account number for each account. You're going to list them separately, and the value of each account. The value is just, we want to get a rough idea of how big the estate is. We know these values change from time to time, and so it's not important that they be to the, to the penny or anything like that. Then the timeshare. Well, one of the assets, so we went through accounts, now timeshare. Many people have timeshares, and so you just answer the questions. They own it together. Does this timeshare own a particular unit? Well, sometimes, you just have points you can use. Other times you actually have a particular unit. Just answer the questions. Marriott's the timeshare management company is here again because Marriott was listed as a financial institution, or a transfer agent, actually. Let's go back and look at Marriott, how that was answered. I think I answered it both. For Marriott, if we go back to other important people and look at Marriott, what are the roles for Marriott? Well, as I put down a transfer agent, because Marriott keeps track of who owns the units. It's not really a financial institution. It keeps track of the title to the asset. It's a transfer agent. So if you had to sell it, you'd have to go through Marriott to transfer the title to a new buyer, to the person to whom you sold it. And then we go back down to the assets again, just going down the list. We've got stock certificates. So they own them jointly. It's at CompuShare. It's sort of rare that people own the stock certificates themselves, as opposed to having so many shares like at a Merrill Lynch or something, or at a brokerage account. But it's just sometimes you could actually have them in your safety deposit box, but most people would have them registered with a transfer agent like CompuShare, or either CompuShare or ComputerShare. Then we have the safety deposit box. Well, again, if you do have a safety deposit box, you need to say what bank it's at, and you have to know the box number, and you want to know what's in the value of what's in it, and kind of describe what's in it. It's not like you have to do it in great detail, but we need to know. Automobile, pretty straightforward. This automobile. This Audi is owned by Jane and John jointly. There's no loan on it. That's the value, the type, year, make, model. This is to show you here another one. And then people sometimes have like travel trailers. We put those under automobiles. Here. Contract. Stock option. Stock option. Well, John works at Nike and he's got stock options. So yes, they're valuable and they're listed here. It's owned by John. So that's how you fill out John. The name of the company that issued them and how many shares they have. Business. Well, Jane has a business. So you're going to want to talk about her business, this flower shop. Insurance policy. Well, this could be life insurance. Here, John has $1 million worth of life insurance. The primary beneficiary is Jane. And then the alternate beneficiary, well, this is something you don't have to know. It says trust for the benefit of William Jones and Phoebe Jones. Those are minors. So your attorney can help you with how to describe, do your best, but your attorney will take a look at it, and then the final documents will have the correct beneficiary designations. It's not necessarily what you have now, it's what we want you to have that we're interested in the estate plan. Retirement accounts, another big issue. So here's a retirement account that Jane has, and the value, just say the value is $545,000. She owns it individually. It's a traditional IRA. You see the options here. The primary is John, and the alternate would be the trust for the benefit of the children. Here's the account number. Oh, we don't have this end. Where is this with? Well, this is with Vanguard, okay? So what will happen is when we do all the paperwork, there's going to be a letter to Vanguard asking Vanguard to confirm the identity of the beneficiaries on the retirement account. And so to do that, we need the address for Vanguard. It may be that these letters won't be mailed, but they provide a clear path as to what's supposed to happen. And maybe you accomplish this change by filling out an online form or contacting Vanguard on the phone or whatever. But we like to have a written kind of a record of what's supposed to happen, and that's why we collect this information. Then savings bonds, that's pretty obvious, just to fill it out if you have savings bonds. Oil and gas, amazingly, people do have oil and gas mineral rights, and again, you would just fill it out. This is have a transfer information. Again, you need to know who determines who owns the oil and gas. It'd be some type of an entity, and we need you to fill that out with the address of that company. So that kind of explains all the assets, how you would fill them out. If you have questions, don't worry. Your attorney will help you with this later when you go over this form with your attorney. But do your best to try and be as complete as possible when you fill out the form. The referral, again, you can just type how you referred yourself to the firm. So in this case, John has prepaid legal insurance with MetLife, which is an employee benefit offered by his employer, Nike. And we would have to know that if that were the case. And finally, here, you could write stuff in here about questions you might have for the attorney. That would help the attorney prepare for the conference you're going to have later when you go over the answers to the form. Now, at this point, you could at any point during this interview, you can always click Finish Later, and then you can come back to the form. But when you're done, you would do Create Documents, and then the attorney is notified that you've completed the form, and he or she will get back to you on that. I'm going to wait for just a minute. I'll show you what happens when you click Create Documents. But this is the end of step 3, talking about, entering information on the form. Once you have finished entering the information, click Create Docs. The client interview document is then produced in Microsoft Word. Let's go ahead and click the button. You are then given the opportunity to download the document. The document that is produced is a Microsoft Word document and incorporates the answers that you gave to the questions in the interview. Just to kind of summarize it, it shows the notes for the attorney, it shows the client information summary, John's personal information, Jane's personal information, information about the children, information about representatives, guardian, person representative, power of attorney, advance directive, the accountant, the financial planner, other important people, also disinherited persons, and the distribution plan. In addition, the asset spreadsheet is produced, which actually, although this is in Word, does do math. So it has the values of all the assets. Then at the end, it actually has a total down here. So it's very handy, and this is something you can save on your computer. This concludes step 4, and this is the end of this video. If you have any questions, contact your attorney.